Hi, welcome back to Massenet. This week we're going to be talking about the movies Scarface and T-Men and the different genres of noir and gangster and how they intersect and differ. So, Anna.
So I'm going to explain briefly what T-Men is. So T-Men was released in 1947. It's a noir film, and it's about two treasury agents who go undercover into what's the word? Like fake money.
Money laundering.
Counterfeit. That word just did not come to mind. I was thinking coin. Counterfeit money ring. And they face, they're around people that create counterfeit money, so they're around criminals and their lives are at risk, and it's a whole shebang.
And then Scarface is a 1932 pre-code gangster movie that follows Tony Camonte, who is a member of the South Side mob, and how he works his way up the ranks and sort of like gains glory in the gang before his very, very public and very, very flashy downfall after he gets too close to the sun and eventually is shot down by the cops in his own home.
All right. I think that we can start off with just talking about T-Men, because when I was watching it, I was just like, this is so like just stereotypically noir. Like they would like say lines and I'm like, oh my god, like, you know how Hugh has us write like best noir lines? I was just like, I'm just gonna fill the whole list with T-Men quotes. So first off, there was one line when they said the underworld can always use good men, which I think is just kind of like archetypal. Is that the right word to use when talking about noir? Because it's just they're pulling in like people who previously weren't involved in crime into crime, and they're kind of like seeing like their journey and maybe like the psychological like transition that they're going through. And just that line, like the underworld can always use good men, it's just kind of like people who existed outside of crime being pulled into like this hermetic kind of hidden crime from the rest of society, like the underworld. So that's just something I just wanted to like off the bat be like, this is a line I found kind of noir.
Yeah, and that contrast to like, again, you were saying the underworld and like how it's like hidden and stuff. And one thing we're going to talk about in Scarface, and we'll show some clips around, is about how obvious everything around them is happening. It's like pretty out in the open.
Yeah, because in T-Men, you had the undercover agents where they really tried to separate their personal lives from like how they were interacting with the crime when they were going, you know, undercover in the counterfeit ring. Whereas in gangster films, it's like not so hidden, so like covered up. They're very much like their lives are crime and they're very flashy about it. They're not trying to hide it. Like whereas in noir, they're kind of like existing like under the radar kind of.
Yeah, like in Scarface is like becoming the king of the city, or you know, and it's like their name was who they are, you know, so everyone like connects them to that name. Whereas in noir, it's trying to be like hidden.
Yeah, sort of like the noir protagonist, like kind of like aims to be like the ordinary guy and just sort of like be unnoticed. I remember like specifically in class, you know, like last week we were talking about how like Walter Neff in Double Indemnity, literally like his aim was to be invisible and to commit like the perfect undetectable crime. And the whole point of gangster crime and like gangster movies is the intimidation and this sort of like not like, you know, making sure that people know exactly who you are and what crimes you've committed and what you're capable of. Sort of like, you know, like the noir man, sort of like he wants to be unseen, and the gangster specifically wants everybody to know who he is and his name, or like, you know, the weird gang names that they give each other. Oh my god, they like, you know, like Tony Camonte's name is literally Scarface because he's got a scar on his face. Clever.
Oh my god, no one could put two and two together.
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest thing where they like differ, because like in how they operate and like how they present themselves or don't present themselves to the world. Like noir, a big thing about noir is like the hermetic crime. They're like doing these specific actions in order to make it so that no one can see what they're doing. Whereas in gangster films, they want people to know what they're doing. Like in noir they're kind of like trying to evade the police, whereas in Scarface he had a rapport with the police. Like the police knew what they were doing and then they know what they were doing, whereas like in noir it's very much trying to like have this convoluted plan in order so that no one is aware of like what you're doing under or behind the scenes. So
Yeah, and I mean, oh, sorry.
oh no.
They do have a lot of similarities too in like lighting and like sound use. I feel like they use music at the same time, you know, when like someone is dying, the music is like louder and all that. But it's interesting that like the main difference is just like people knowing or not knowing, you know.
Yeah. And this whole like concept of like operating in the shadows versus operating in daylight in gangster films versus noir. We have these two scenes picked out from Scarface and T-Man that I think really do showcase this. So let me just screen share. This first one is from T-Man. And this is the first scene. It's like 5 minutes into the film where a murder is committed, and it's very, very archetypal, very typical, quintessential noir. So like obviously the guy is emerging from the shadows. He's doing the crime at night, whereas in a gangster, they're very much not trying to do all of this actions in order to hide the crime. And now onto the Scarface scene. Let's pull that up real quick.
There he goes.
There you go. Now, I wouldn't call a body flying from a car noir subtle. So I think right there you can really see how differently noir criminals and gangster film criminals operate just by the way that they choose to like allow people to see. I know that in Scarface, they went on a whole drive-by, like they were going bar to bar, intimidating these barkeeps into buying their liquor. And then at one point, they just blew up one of the bars. And
Yeah,
it was like broad daylight.
There's several like bar drive-by scenes in Scarface. I think like each one is like more ridiculous than the last because you have that initial one where Tony is, you know, like taking out all of the old, you know, like kingpins that existed under, you know, like Big Louie's reign for his new boss. And he sort of like, he tosses a grenade into one. He just like shoots the bartender, like the body falls out onto the street. And then later, you know, you bring in the machine guns, the Tommy guns, and they literally just like drive by all these things, like shoot up the windows completely. You can see a line of bullet holes. It's too bad that we can't share sound with the screen share as well, because like the loudness and just like the absolutely like explosive sound of the machine guns, like of the scenes of like there's people screaming, there's car horns honking, there's people yelling. You don't see that in noir because like it's pretty antithetical to noir crime, because if you see like these, if noir crime makes a noise, it's very brief and it's usually at a place where no one would be around to hear it anyway. And sort of like and then in Scarface you see the crimes happening in crowded restaurants or on packed streets, sort of like at almost like at prime social hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I also
I feel like
think about
oh, sorry. You go.
the sound lags on end.
Oh, I was you go.
It kind of reminds, like, it makes me think about the how like noir, you don't really often see how it impacts like the people around whoever they kill, and then in gangster, like that's kind of what you get the most impact. I think for me is like you see like either the family or the friends have taken impact of like the death, because I remember what was the movie, like the scene we saw in class where like they lean up the dead body on the board against the door, and brother just opens it while the mom's like upstairs so excited her son's coming back home. Remember while he's like just dead on a board, and like there you see like you at least get like because we don't see like how the mom and I think that maybe the sister or the girlfriend or whatever were upstairs getting that room ready. We don't see their reaction, but we see like the brother, just everything just like sink down in him. And I'm pretty sure we labeled that as a gangster scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was too taken aback by the bored dead guy to like.
He just falls right in there.
I was because at first I was like, wow, he's standing there really weird, and then he just kind of like fell, and then I was like, oh, he's dead. But yeah, for noir, we don't very often see how it impacts like the family and the friends, because at the very end of Teen Men, you see like how like the newspaper or whatever, and it says like, oh, the wife is, she's keeping his memory in her heart, and so like you see like the good side of losing somebody, where just like people like sugarcoat it for the public, but you don't see her grief. You don't see how sad she is that she lost her husband, who I think they were like newlyweds. You don't see like how sad it is to lose your husband or to lose like anybody that you love, really. You just are like, oh, she's keeping his memory alive, and we're just like, oh, great, happy ending.
Yeah, as opposed to like multiple scenes in Scarface where you see like Tony's very Italian mother like mourning the loss of like her son and her daughter, sort of like the metaphorical loss of like the loss of her son to to gang life, to mob life, and she's worried that like his younger sister Cheska is also going to follow him, and she's going to like lose both her children. And we see multiple scenes of her like begging with either Cheska or Tony of like, don't do this, it's going to end up all wrong for you, like it's taken away my son, I'm worried it's going to take away my daughter, etc., etc. And then there is that scene where Tony just comes into Cheska and her new husband's house and shoots him in front of her. I'm laughing because it's so over the top. He just comes in, he shoots the husband, and then his sister is like, Tony, what the fuck? Why'd you shoot my husband? And then he just leaves.
No, he dips.
It's also like, I'm Italian. I come from a very Italian family. Italian people are so dramatic about anything. Like, you could cook something wrong and that's it. Like, that's the end of the day. Like, something, like, one go right. So to have, like, your son become a gangster, like, to have this, like, and, like, that, like, my grandmother would absolutely just fall on the floor. Like, she would not get back up. And so, like, there's their whole element of, like, yes, gangster films, you see the more dramatic side of the family, but then it's also, like, at least in this film, you have, like, the Italian, and, like, that's what made me laugh, as I was like, oh, yes, my people, my dramatic people.
Something I noticed that I think we saw pretty clearly in the scenes that we showed was just like the cinematographic differences between gangster and noir. Like, maybe not so much in the gangster scene, but in the noir scene, they literally were like operating in the shadows. It was harsh light, and the guy emerges from the shadows, and as he's staying there shooting them, his whole figure is dark, and it's kind of like a spotlight on the man dying. So you have that kind of contrast happening between the lighting. Whereas when I was watching Scarface, I noticed that when they were doing their crime, like the lighting was just as if it was like a regular movie, like regular movie. If it was like, if they weren't doing crime at all, like they were lit the same way as like their background was. Whereas in noir, you kind of don't have that like balance. I don't know if I'm like articulating this.
No, like, imagine if Legally Blonde was shot.
Yeah.
Like,
so like in Gangster, if you were like watching it silently with no context, you wouldn't think that crime was happening in the scenes in which it was. Whereas if you watch noir, you get that like the Venetian blinds, and you get that like that high contrast in the shadows. Whereas in the Gangster, it was like kind of like nonchalant in the way that it was like, this is their normal life, so it's going to be lit normally, and it's going to look as if they're just having a conversation, whereas they're literally like doing crime.
You also don't really get a lot of. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like a big thing that impacts like the differences in between noir and gangster films is like power dynamics. Like in noir, like it's almost like the criminal is like, even though he's like killing people or whatever crime is happening, like he's kind of like the weakest because he has like the cops following him, and like he's trying to hide his name and everything. So that kind of goes with like the dark lighting and like the kind of like editing maybe. Whereas in like gangster films, like we said, they're very like their name is who they are, and like all the crimes that happen are in daylight, and they're very like non-intimidated by the cops. So it feels like all the criminals in gangster films are like the highest position, even though there are cops following them, they're like not scared of the cops. So yeah, I feel like the lighting and everything like that kind of goes along with it, and the not being intimidated by other people is like how being able to watch it without sound, it makes it seem like there's no crime happening because they don't need to hide a crime, you know. It's just like it's like normal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also for the lot of films, you often see them depict they have like the cops in their back pocket, because a lot of gangster, it is extortion, it's money laundering, it's all about like noir. It's doing things in the shadows and trying not like to try to have the smallest impact besides where you need to have your impact. Like T-Men, they're just trying to, they don't go into other realms of crime. Versus like gangster, you have these crime families where like they have like their hands in all these pots, like they're trying to be like there's an umbrella of what they do. It's kind of like when you join a crime family in BitLife, and
Or like a pyramid scheme.
it's like a pyramid scheme, but way worse. Like it's way worse than
Pyramid scheme with murder.
yeah, it's a man's MLM. And so like for gangster films, they have way more of way more quantity wise violent crimes. At least in the past, like they either hint at or they've done because of these crime families, of course they have. Versus noir, it's like in a lot of the films we've seen, it's like this guy is just like what's the one that I'm thinking? A lot of them. Or like this, it's like he has not committed a crime until now, and he's desperate, so he has to. Like
probably Warren Quimby from
like,
Tension.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the one with Keys. Really, is the one that's coming to mind.
Oh yeah, Double Indemnity with Neff.
Yes, that one.
He just did it because he was horny.
Yeah, wasn't Detour was also one where it was like an innocent guy he does a murder by accident that he's thrown into sort of like.
But like gangster films, they're not innocent even beforehand, but somehow they're like so heartwarming too. I don't know if it's just the accents or like the way that they all love their moms even though they're gangsters, but it's
they're very
like
charismatic.
Yeah, but they also go home, they're like, "Hi mama," and you're just like, "Oh, mama's boy." Even though like he murdered 12 people, like it's just there's something. I'm going on 10 different tangents here, and I apologize.
Well, they have very like fun and like easygoing personalities. Like even the way that they interact with the cops, which I think is very funny. It's sort of like the technicalities that get like Tony and the other gangsters he worked with free in Scarface, because they're talking to the cops. And the cops are like, well, we know you did this, like sort of like understating of sort of like, we might not have the evidence to convict you. We may not have that technicality, but we all know you did it. And then the gangsters just like, they're back them like, okay, officer, bye.
I know. Versus,
like an understanding between each other. It's like really
then it's like one moment you see that in noir, at least what we've seen, which is Pick Up on South Street, where I forgot the character's name, but he goes, he goes in at the end. They're like, "You're gonna do this again?" And he's like, "Come on, officer, of course not." And we all know he's going to. Like, we all know he's gonna go back to his criminal hooligan ways. But guess what? He just has this charisma to be like, no.
He's sort of like a bit of an outlier in terms of like noir protagonists, at least that we've seen. It's almost sort of like a weird holdover from the gangster genre that's kind of like trickled down into him.
Yeah, he's like a gangster representation in noir, which we don't often see, just because noir, as we were saying, has a lot of like good men desperate that need to do something bad, versus gangster films is just like, this is just the life I chose to live.
Yeah,
I just choose to commit crime.
And then also like in the the interaction between like the police and the and the gang, the criminal world, is sort of like, because we see that in Scarface, obviously, of like, I know that you've done this, but I can't get you for it. because like in T-Men, they are government agents, you know, like they're with the FBI, they're with the Treasury. But there's no real like you know, acknowledgement of like the possible interaction between the law and crime because of that, like again, probably that like that noir hermetic boundary. Maybe just because we'd never see any interactions between the mob and the local police force much, but it's almost like T-Men doesn't really acknowledge the possible like corruption and the possible like manipulation of the law by these gangs and by these very high power criminals.
Yeah, definitely. Also, speaking of like that hermetic element of noir, there was this one scene in T-Men when I can't remember, I think it was Gennaro. I'm gonna go with that. So he was trying to get information about the schemer. So he had this whole conversation in a phone booth. And it was like this one, they were both pretending to be on the phone. And that's like very just blatantly like they're operating in public, they're operating in plain sight, but they're doing it in a way that everyone around them is unsuspecting. So they're kind of like that's how noir would operate in quote unquote plain sight. That's how they would operate in the daylight. Whereas in Scarface, they do their business, they have their conversations like in restaurants, just out in the open. They don't make any attempt in order to like have these little devices in order to cover up what they're saying or like their actions. They don't have like these little tricks like going to the supermarket and double indemnity or doing this like faux phone call in T-Men. Like I remember there was one scene where Tony just walked into a restaurant, he sat down and they just started talking about the criminal underworld, or they were sitting in a barber shop and the cop was about to walk in and then they just took their guns and threw them in a basket, and it was just like so nonchalant about like their criminal activity, whereas in noir they do these specific things in order to hide it the best they can. And in gangster films they just kind of throw caution to the wind and they're like, we're here, this is who we are, like there's no hiding it.
I think like the closest. Go ahead. Okay. I was just gonna say like the closest, like because I have a pretty brief point of like the closest we get to that like any sense of them trying to hide it is like when they have conversations in their little like back rooms and their bootlegging bars and stuff like that. But the conversations that happen there in those sort of like secret areas are pretty much like, you know, like what is it, indistinguishable from the conversations that happen out in the open. It's just that sort of like the only difference is that usually when you get into those back rooms, you see more of like inter-gang conflict, which usually doesn't happen outside of them. So the crime itself isn't hidden, it's more like the weaknesses within the gang, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
Oh god, interesting.
Well, the gang also has a more like familial feeling to me. I don't know if this is gonna shade my feeling, but it's kind of like, you know, when you have like company coming over, like let's say like, because this usually happens, everyone's in like, especially for holidays, everyone is wicked tense and you're about to have your aunts and uncles over and you and your mom are fighting over cleaning the house.
Yeah.
And then as soon as someone shows up, you gotta be getting along. Like you gotta be like,
fuck it up.
Yeah, you can fight after, but your aunts and uncles are here, so you gotta look like pleasant because you have to outdo uncles. Like you gotta put up, you are better than them. So like, and then so the back room is like your home when your aunts and uncles aren't there. And so you can have arguments. You can be like, Mom, I'm not cleaning my room. And then as soon as like they're out of the back room, they have to be in public, especially like when there's these other crime families, they have to be like, oh wait, no, we get along. We're great. We're solid. We're better than you. We're Nana's favorite. First
there's also this thing I noticed between the two films is kind of like difference, I guess, like this polar opposite. Whereas in noir, they separate their personal lives from the crime so like desperately. Like in this film, the T-Men, the Treasury agents, they adopt whole new personalities. They don't tell their wives, they move away, they separate themselves. Whereas in gangster films, they live in the crime, like Tony's mother knows. Or something, maybe I'm reaching a little bit, but when Cheska died and they, like the police had Tony's house surrounded, he had machine guns in his house and he had the iron blinds. So like the crime existed very much in his personal life, and they died in the home. Like there was no separation between like these two identities that these noir people tend to have. Whereas this is who I'm going to show society, and then this is who I am behind the scenes. And then in Scarface, it's very much that distinction is lost because they live, breathe gangster crime. They live, breathe crime. It's there's no like I'm gonna do crime outside of my house, and I'm going to come home and I'm going to watch Netflix and pretend I didn't do crime. Like, there's none of that.
Well, because
I
it's like
also,
is the only life they know versus film noir. Like I'm gonna use another example of Double Indemnity. Like she calls him at work and he's like, no, we'll talk at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Even
Exactly.
at work on the phone is too close for film noir. Like you have to be out in public, pretending you're buying baby food for your non-existent baby. Like you can't, like you can't connect to your personal life whatsoever. But for the gangster films, they are criminals. Like that's their one character trait. Like
that's their job.
like if they were to define themselves, they'd be like, I am a criminal. And that's it. And like obviously like they're probably like kind, sweet mama boys. Like they probably know how to cook pasta, but like that's it. Like, you know.
Like they don't have a reason to hide it as well, because noir protagonists and noir characters are coming from, again, from the outside going into the inside usually. So they have a life that they could potentially go back to and things that like they have to lose. Whereas with the gangster, everything about their life is tied up in the crime anyway, and the crime is how they sustain the lifestyle. Because like all of Tony's money comes from either like bootlegging, killing off other gang members, rival gang members, and like I don't know, armed robbery probably, and that's how he makes his money. It's not like Walter Neff where he's killing someone because he's horny, and all of his money comes from his salary as an insurance agent.
And then also like for film noir, they hope to go back to their regular life. They want it to be like, yeah, they want to blip and then forget about it, and like they want to go on like that never happened. Versus like for gangster films, they're like, yeah, that happened, and
like in Kensington, Warren Quimby, he literally has two completely separate lives. Like he can do this whole like secret identity thing, but then he gets to go back and he gets to run his pharmacy. Whereas like noir people, they kind of assume that like, okay, I'm gonna do this and this is gonna happen and then it's gonna be over with and then I'm gonna be able to continue on with my life. Whereas gangsters are like, this is my life. And
it's just a normal Tuesday. I killed somebody,
it's a
with a
Tuesday.
cop, and I went home.
Yeah, like that scene I mentioned, like the last scene when they get in the house, again, maybe a little bit reaching for some symbolic meaning, but the guy, I forget his name, it wasn't Tony, but he closes the door, and after the doors close, the bullets still enter the door and kill him. Like,
Yeah.
there's no hiding from gang life, whereas in noir, they're able to go home. It's like Walter's able to go back to his apartment, he's able to relax. He like there's just simply none of that in gangster. Gangster is very out there, very flamboyant. Here we are, we do crime, and then noir is like very in the shadows. I don't want anyone to know I do crime, like type thing.
And then noir, when they can't relax, it's because of themselves. Like it's all in their head. Like they got all worked up, like trying to keep involved in. Versus like gangster films, like they're pretty freaking chill about what they're doing for what they're like for like the stakes that they have. But the only like the real reason why they can't relax are like, well, I have people coming after me. I am a criminal. Yeah. There are other criminals after me. There are cops after me. And so like there's external forces in gangster films that keep them from staying calm, and then there's internal forces within film noir films that keep them from staying calm, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also this one line in Scarface that I wrote down and I just remembered about. And it was, they're glorifying the gangsters by giving them publicity. Like people know about the gangsters. Like again, like maybe beating a dead horse with this point, but like the gangsters have publicity. Like there's no one putting in the papers like Warren Quimby strikes again. Like there's none of that. Like it's, yeah.
We even did in real life, like when Al Capone's vault got opened, like my mom told me like she came home from school with her friends to sit there and watch it. Like that was a big deal. Like, so even like in our real world, not films, we make them celebrities because they're again like celebrities are living these lives we can never imagine. Like
Tony had this very public death. Like he walked out and he was shot, like, and there was a bunch of policemen surrounding him and there was lights on him. Like he had this very public theatrical death, whereas you don't really see that in noir. When someone dies in noir, it's very like covered up and it's very like it's not happening in front of like 100 people.
I mean, one scene that did remind me of was in what was the last movie we watched? Sunset Boulevard.
I think so. Yeah.
Where he was like,
well, we watched Crisscross and then Sunset.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where they were killed in like the last scene. Or wait, I'm thinking of the scene where they're like acting or something. It's like very theatrical because they think they're in a movie or
Yeah,
something.
Sunset Boulevard.
Oh,
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that, but then I was like, oh, that's like theatrical on purpose, you know, and it's like standing out.
Yeah, like the when Joe is in the pool and all the
Yeah.
like the paparazzi are like, holy shit, there's a man in the
Exactly.
pool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the one exception
Exactly.
that we get.
But it's like a
Um,
clear exception, you know.
Yeah, and even then we're seeing they get there after the crime happens. So like when he gets shot and when he actually dies and falls in, the only people there are Max and Norma. So they're the only witnesses to when it happens. And then the crowd shows up after. And then, you know, you have Tony with his audience of like the entire police force.
Exactly.
The police are also a bigger factor, I think, in gangster films and noir, because noir, like, they're like this thing like in the back of their minds, like, oh, the police will catch me, but you don't often see the interactions with them. Versus like I think gangster films, again, probably because they have them in their back pocket, like all that jazz. The police are much more like involved in the storyline and have like a bigger impact in what happens, i.e., in Tony's death.
Or at least not like police in noir. It's always like a police lieutenant investigator guy. That feels much more closer than to a private eye than to like an actual uniformed police officer. We never follow the guys in uniform. It's always like some kind of like barely adjacent police officer only in name sort of guy.
Yeah, it's more like a Sherlock Holmes guy versus like you're at like just like the police force.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's all I had to. I just had some like just like, so this is so noir, like lines from Teeman that I wrote down. Like there was a line that said, sorry, they either go through with it or go under. There is no turning back. Like type of a like end of the line, baby type thing. It's like they either do this or they get shot basically. And then as that line is said, they're walking down this dark hallway, and it's like you can barely see what's happening. There's like 2 light bulbs at the top on the ceiling type thing. Or there was something I did notice. Oops, sorry.
Are we all in the consensus that noir is way cheesier? Like
it feels cheesy in a different way.
Yeah,
I think they're both.
Because like I feel like for noir at least, I just like I sit there and every time I say something, I'm like,
I think because we've watched so many, we're just like, oh my god, this again. Oh my god.
Like,
I will say that like Tony had a lot of moments, like when he was flirting with like his boss's girl, like a lot of those lines I was just sort of like, oh Tony, you rascal. Because like it's sort of like it's almost like, you know, like what is it, we call it in class like oftentimes like because noir has like noir jargon, and I feel like gangster has like a corresponding like gangster jargon. And it's sort of like it's different, you know, like the like all the like the stereotypical, you know, like Al Pacino sort of like, you know, mannerisms and things like that.
I just think it's more time sisters do it. I don't know.
I think Scarface.
I was gonna say like one other thing that I noticed of just like a similarity in a weird detached way of like we were talking earlier about how noir has various signifiers before like someone's gonna die, you know, like they go into the room with the Venetian blind lighting, or they go into, you know, like an abandoned place, and you know you sort of know that like something's gonna happen here. It's like gangster, I noticed, like, or at least in Scarface, they had their own way of signifying like someone's gonna die here, but they did in like a very overt, very like, you know, obvious way, and that was with the X's. Like we saw like the rafters full of the X's before those guys were shot in front of the wall. Whenever like some violence happens, there's some kind of like architectural like, you know, X sort of like somewhere in the scene, and then you see that, and then someone dies, and you know, like you have those signifiers, but it's sort of like with gangster, or at least in Scarface, it was very obvious of like, oh, there's the X.
There's the X.
Someone's getting off.
Yeah, they have their own ways of like signaling to the audience. It's like they have their own formulas, and then if you're able to like understand it, and then you're like, oh okay, like type thing. It's like noir, it's like, oh, here comes the femme fatale, and then this is like their hermetic element. They're trying to cover it up, but we know it's not going to go well because noirs never go well type thing. So definitely. I also noticed in T-Men, I don't know if like anyone else thought this, probably not, but like when they were looking through the like newspapers to try and get information on the gang, I was like, this is like a true crime fanatic, like going through like the Gabby Petito case and combing through like literally everything, like every newspaper, and being like obsessive about it type thing. It's just the way they set up that scene. It was like I was like looking at it, and then they were like gathering background history on like the local mob, and they were like, it was just like I just watched, and I'm like, oh, I'm like I probably
they could like so like they, and then like, you know, placing themselves and sort of, you know, like, oh, we're the only surviving like river gang members, and, you know, like here's all of the lore on the local gangs and all of that.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Outsiders meets Gabby Petito. The Gabby Petito case, just to say, because you hit me with true crime, the way that I work at the barn at 6 a.m. and I just put in my AirPods and just listen to like a podcast about it, and I'm like, like Brian's not dead. His parents stuck his teeth there. He's probably used his baby teeth.
You're like the lady from Gaslight.
Literally,
like the lady obsessed with murder.
Yeah.
I watched that and I was like, wait, that's me in 50 years. That's me. But yeah.
All right.
Do we think we are
fun fact this week? Fun
Yeah,
fact.
you had like a story about like one of the directors being problematic, or
No. So Scarface was produced by the Howard Hughes, right? One of the most interesting, problematic, and fellow OCD haver in life. And fun story, ice cream obsession, by the way. Can't relate. I'm allergic to dairy. But he was obsessed with the Baskin-Robbins banana nut ice cream. And when Baskin-Robbins discontinued it, he ordered them to make a batch of 350 gallons of it and then sent his employees to go pick it up. And then as soon as they got it, he went, wait a minute, I don't like that anymore. And so he became obsessed with French vanilla ice cream instead. So like he sent his employees to pick up this giant batch of 350 gallons of banana nut ice cream. And then I was like, actually, feeling more French vanilla lately.
I think
this
I
picture,
can
like, you know,
seen on the movie now that this man ordered banana ice cream, not against his will. He literally willingly said, send me banana ice cream. I think I have to change my whole opinion on this.
I just imagine being like a production assistant or something on the set, and, you know, like the director is like, hey, can you pick something up for me? And you get there and it's just tubs of ice cream.
Like, they're gonna be like a big shot. Like, I'm working with this big shot director, but like, no, I'm just gonna go pick up 300 tubs of Ben and Jerry's.
And his ice cream boy.
And his
Well, like, all of how difficult he is to work with. I love Howard Hughes and how problematic he is. So I have another fun fact on this one. He produced The Outlaw. I think he was produced on it. And his whole plan on like selling this was to make soon to be star Jane Russell's like boobs bigger. And because he kept being upset with how gravity was working against him on that. So he created the Wonder Bra.
Oh my God.
Was he the inventor of the push-up bra?
Like the Wonder Bra was like the first push-up bra, I think. And he designed it that way Jane Russell like boobs would not be taken up by gravity.
I didn't
More
think
things
the words
change,
you
the
were
more
gonna
they stay the
say
same.
while I was taking a sip of water were gonna be Wonder Bra.
Oh my god, I was like just like, oh, I love Howard Hughes, but let's see if there's anything else that I don't know. And then I got to Wonder Bra and I was like this is fabulous. But I thought I'd ease you in with the banana nut ice cream.
Oh, I thank you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, if there's nothing else to add on the psychopath banana nut Wonder Bra man.
Like a competition between like him and Billy Wilder and his monkey funeral during Sunset Boulevard. Because I didn't share this during the Sunset Boulevard episode because like I was focused on a lot of other stuff. But apparently when like Billy Wilder was asked, you know, like, so how do you want to shoot the monkey funeral scene? He was just like, you know, like your normal monkey funeral.
Yeah. You don't have those every like Saturday night?
I have to go to those all the time at church. Such a hassle.
Okay. Alrighty. I'll see you guys on that note, on the monkey funeral note. I'll see you guys next week.
Bye.